You're listening to For the Republic, a love letter to Star Wars animation.
Hello there.
We have been wondering for weeks what truly happened on Brendok. We got the answer. Oh boy, was it something. Welcome back to our Acolyte recaps here on For the Republic, a love letter to Star Wars animation. It is Andrew and Donovan back here once again to talk about Choice, episode 7 of the... Now, real quickly, just to address the elephant in the room real quick. Yes, you might be wondering, hey, hold on, you're talking about episode 7, but the season finale already aired when this is posting. And yes, that is the case. We are very late this week, and we apologize for that, but we couldn't go without talking about this episode just because we've been wondering what happened in these flashbacks the entire season. And of course, we got to talk about it. I apologize. I've been dealing with the flu for the past week. It has not been fun at all. And then when I finally started feeling better, we had some scheduling conflicts. So we are finally here recording this again to peel back the curtain about an hour after the season finale of The Acolyte is aired. So we were both dodging spoilers like it's like our lives depend on it right now.
It's like it's 1999 all over again, and we're Keanu Reeves just like weaving in and out of spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Normally, I'll have like something open like while we're doing these episodes, just so in case like, oh, hold on, let me pull from this or this real quick. Not doing that this week. That is not happening. But the good news is we'll be getting 2 episodes this week. So we'll be talking about episode 7, and then later on in the week we'll be talking about the season finale. So, oh boy, that will be fun. We're just gonna get it sure is. We're just gonna get straight into the episode this week. We're gonna save the archives for later in the week when we have our full panel on and we're able to discuss the season finale in full. So let's talk about hashtag what happened on Brendok. One, I like that we've committed to the bit for this long.
We're trying to make that hashtag happen.
We're trying to make the hashtag happen, and you know it's happened at points. But I was hoping it would like truly catch on because we've just been wondering, and we like again how each episode of this season has kind of had a contrasting title or a parallel title with another episode it pairs with. Be it the 2 episodes where there are 2 titles in one, like in the first 2 episodes and then episode 6, and then how this was kind of the parallel to the 3rd episode, which was Destiny. Now this is Choice. And that revolves around a couple things. It could be Mother Aniseya's choice to let Osha leave the Coven, join the Jedi. It could be Soul's choice that he makes between Mae and Osha at the end of the episode. And it could also be Osha's choice to leave, like we said. Many choices happen in this episode, and of course, some were not great and led to some things happening.
Oh boy,
we got after episode 3 when we kind of got like the skewed Coven version of what happened. The Jedi looking like way too suspicious, and Dara did not look good in those episodes. We got the Jedi version, or what we think is the real truth of what happened on hashtag what happened on Brendok. And real quickly, I just want to, on behalf of For the Republic, issue an apology to Indara. Master Indara, we've been slandering your name for the last 7 weeks. And I just want to say that we are sorry we did not get the full picture. I do not think she's fully innocent here. Let me be totally upfront. Because she definitely at the end of the episode was like, yeah, no, we're covering it up. And she was like gung-ho on that. And some of the ways that she handled things definitely didn't make her seem like she's totally innocent. But as someone who was like, Indara, it's all her fault. And like even early on was like, Indara might be connected to the Sith plot. I'm like, I am truly sorry, Master Indara. This was not your fault entirely. Go ahead.
Shout out to Carrie-Anne Moss for like just basically doing what we all kind of assumed she would do, and just be amazing at like getting across that kind of like Jedi energy that we've been kind of like getting in like fits and bursts really with the show, because what's been cool is we've got to see so many different kinds of Jedi, and with Carrie Ann Moss, with Master Indara, we get to see a very kind of like level-headed character in Master Indara. And like you said, we all assumed that because she was the first one to die and she seemed the most like shady and like just like very kind of like almost monotone, like no emotion. It kind of seemed like there is the Force, but like she seemed like the one who might have had like a bigger hand in what was going on in Brendok, and it was the opposite. And it does kind of like lend to this like very bitter note of irony that she is the one Jedi that Mae kills directly, and she is arguably the one who wanted the same thing as Mae did, which was for the Jedi to not have any hand in dealing with the Coven. It's kind of there's a very kind of like Star Trek vibe here with the whole do not interfere in like there's a reason. I remember people saying there was a reason that Starfleet have that policy in the show where we don't interfere with like native cultures because our interference can cause catastrophe. And there's a really interesting article on Gizmodo by Jordan Mason talking about he's using his own experiences as a Native American to kind of talk about the undertones of colonialism that are like explored in this episode. And I definitely recommend everyone go and read it, because it's really interesting how it deals with the idea of like just like invasive forces, and like the idea of like one side thinking that their way is right simply because it's all they're used to. And it's just really good episode. Like I said on my Twitter that this is possibly the most from a certain point of view piece of media Star Wars has put out in the Disney era, and I kind of love it for that, because it's just there's there's so many angles you can come at this from. Like
there's a lot of nuance in this episode, and
exactly,
as you expect, some people didn't quite take to that very well.
That's what I like about it, though. I kind of like that people have different reactions to it based on different characters, because like it's like I also said on my Twitter that like no side is completely in the right or the wrong here, and yet your opinion of it might very well vary depending on what you bring with you as an audience viewer, like depending on how you feel about certain characters. Because like real talk here, I've watched this with my I've watched the Acolyte with my family, and my mother has been a Soul hater from day one. Ooh. She has not trusted him at all. She's always been like, yeah, he's shifty, I don't trust him, I don't trust what's going on. And then this episode came out and my mum felt entirely justified in everything. She was like, yeah, no, this is messed up here. No, I like that you have one side that can like take an overall kind of more damning view of a character, and other people who like, because I've seen people defend Soul and say, oh well, that there's all this other stuff that he was trying to deal with, and it's like I kind of feel like both takes are valid here, because the episode is inviting a lot of that in. I just seen it's really cool
takes varying from Soul as an outright villain to Soul was not justified, but he was just blinded by what he feels is his destiny, but it was in fact a choice. And I'm kind of in the middle there. I don't think this started the so lovely the Jedi are bad actually discourse again, which I don't think is what this show is trying to do.
It's trying to say that they're flawed at the end of the day. Flawed. It's trying to say that they're not perfect people, and the problem is when you've got an institution that's so that's been around for so long and is so kind of wedded to the authoritative nature of the Republic, you're going to get people who make mistakes and overstep their boundaries.
This has been what George has been trying to say since the prequels: is yes, they are the users of the light side, and they are the good guys in the overall story, but they are flawed. And they let their weaknesses get to them and caused their downfall. And there's a great line from Aniseya in this episode of your noble intentions will be, I don't remember the...
Someday those noble intentions you all have will destroy every Jedi in the galaxy. And it's a really interesting line, because it's not like precognizance or anything. She's just being very prescient. She's just observing how their behavior is, how this kind of like this whole, we automatically have good intentions. We're not going to examine how our behavior is kind of like impacting other cultures, because at the end of the day, the Jedi, because like you said, Indara keeps trying to de-escalate things the whole way through. She's trying, like she's the one Jedi that is, aside from Kelnacca, maybe she is the most mindful of this native culture, this coven of witches. And she even says, like, when they first meet the coven, I'll go in alone because it's the least threatening. And Sol insists. Like, that's the kind of thing where Sol, I can understand people having critical views of Sol, because Sol is the one always kind of like pushing things forward a little bit, aside from Torbin, of course, but we'll get to Torbin.
Sol is very much just, he is not blinded per se, but we see him almost kind of struggling with the fact that he doesn't yet have a Padawan learner.
Yeah.
At this time, he is still a Jedi Knight, from what I understand. I think that's what they established, that Indara is clearly like the highest up on the totem pole, and then Kelnacca's also a master, and then Sol's a knight, and Torbin's a Padawan. Because Indara makes that comment like, oh, this is why you don't have a Padawan yet. And I think Sol, seeing that there is life on this planet, and he immediately is like, oh, what is this? What is this coven? And he sees Mother Coral, is like, oh, scary Zabrak, like immediately gets what, our unconscious views with Star Wars species sometimes of this species means evil. And he's
exactly
this kind of spooky coven doing all this chanting. It's like, oh, these kids are in danger. These kids are being captive. And he makes this connection with Ocean. It's like, okay, no, she has to be my Padawan. And I think that you can definitely look at this episode in that light and be like, Sol is doing everything for the sole purpose of he has to have Osha as his Padawan. Now, I don't think he caused everything here. I still think there's the beauty of this episode is we got answers, but we still didn't get all the answers. It's like what we were looking for, and then they give us more questions. Like,
it's Tales of the Empire all over again.
Did Indara kill all those witches at the end, or were they just knocked out and they just burned in the fire? But
I kind of like the idea, because Leslie Headland kind of gave like her own take on it, which was that because Indara kind of goes in and doesn't really understand the way the witches channel the Force, or the thread as they call it. Her interference to kind of like cut off their connection to Kelnacca does, the psychic backlash does kind of like potentially kill them. And it's an interesting thing, because the way Carrie-Anne Moss plays it, you can almost kind of see it where she doesn't know the full ramifications of what she's done, or that she does, and she's just having to kind of like accept that this is because she does kind of say, oh, to Sol after that, like, just go get the girls, because it's like by that point it's very clear that like the line has been crossed and there's just no salvaging the coven.
Has their own things that they bottle up inside and grieved over for 16 years on why this was the thing. And we see that throughout this episode. Another thing that I just think is categorically incorrect that people are trying to paint, including people I respect and like and engage with in this fandom, was the concept of Sol purposely did not try to save Mae at the end of the episode, and he was always going to choose Osha.
It's an interesting one.
It's an interesting one, but I think he's very clearly trying to save both, and then when he realizes he can't, he makes that choice to save Osha, which is like, again, that has to be eating him up. But I think to watch that scene and be like, he wasn't even trying to save Mae. I think
he tried to save Mae. But I think what's interesting is, again, you can like come at it from different points of view and say that, his attachment to Osha does somewhat overpower his other senses in terms of like being able to kind of like, manage the situation with the coven, really. Because like, when he goes to seemingly to stop Torbin, he doesn't really stop Torbin. He just goes with him, and then then just kind of faces off with the coven.
Yeah, that was the weird thing to me. It's like, so what are you doing? It's like, oh, I'll go and stop him. And then he just stops and is just like, yeah, no, we got to climb this wall. And
exactly. And it's just, it kind of shows how like him.
I was just going to say, he clearly has his own vision of what he thinks is his destiny, what he thinks the Force is calling him out to. And it causes him to make these choices and make these mistakes that have haunted him for years.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, it's kind of like a blown up version spread throughout an entire episode of events we've seen before. It is kind of a more twisted version of Qui-Gon bringing Anakin into the Jedi.
Oh, it 100% is, and I was gonna say that about what Mother Aniseya says to Sol about the noble intentions line. It's interesting that you say that, because I was gonna like say about the good intentions line, the noble intentions line that Mother Aniseya says to Sol, because I did see one account post about like how that is kind of like almost trying to say that the Jedi are at fault for their own genocide, and I like that happens in the prequels, and I don't think that's what's happening.
Nope.
Because it's referring more to the fact, because again, this is where the whole like certain point of view thing kind of comes in, because yes, you could argue that Qui-Gon taking Anakin off Tatooine and training him in the ways of the Jedi, it does lead to Anakin having a good influence on characters like Ahsoka and Obi-Wan, and helping to like save a lot of people during the Clone Wars, but it also puts him in a vulnerable position to be exploited by the dark side. And
the
it
Jedi
also
weren't at fault. They showed and revealed what made them vulnerable.
Yeah, like
and the cracks started showing where certain things worsen their perception amongst the general galactic population, and we saw the more corruption, corruption in some areas, and also just having those blinders up on very certain things. Like, oh, again, conversations we've been having for weeks. The Sith possibly couldn't have returned. Count Dooku definitely couldn't be a murderer. There's definitely not a Sith in the Senate controlling everything.
They have become arrogant. Like it's the line that Yoda says in Attack of the Clones that has been shared around a bunch, which I appreciate that people are kind of becoming cognizant of that. You know, too sure of themselves, a flaw more and more common among Jedi. Too sure of themselves they are, even the older, more experienced ones. And you do see that even with like Indara, as we've said, because yes, she is definitely the one that is trying to de-escalate things the most, but she does arguably set things in motion a little bit in terms of how the approach she takes to her Padawan Torbin, because you know Torbin it's very clear at the start of the episode that he doesn't want to be there. He just wants to go back to Coruscant. He's very kind of like he's very Reith Silas coded, but with just like a very kind of different master student relationship.
He's reverse. He doesn't have like. Wants to go back to Jakku.
Yeah, he's reverse Reith. Reith Silas. Definitely read into anyone who's reading who's thinking of getting on board with the High Republic books. I definitely recommend Into the Dark. It's excellent. On that note, I finally have finished Path of Vengeance. I'm done with phase 2.
There we go.
Technically, I'm currently on Tales of Light and Life. I did just finish the Marder Row story, but yeah, I'm excited to be on phase 3. But back to Torbin. Sorry. The thing that's interesting about Torbin is that he says very clearly he wants to go home, and Indara says to Sol, I don't tell him the answers to comfort him. I let him figure them out for himself, which is in theory a good approach. But because she doesn't take a more comforting kind of nurturing role as his master, it does kind of leave him vulnerable to have those anxieties, those fears exploited by Mother Aniseya, which we see later on. And again, we're talking about irony. It's so ironic that like Mother Aniseya does that, like scares Torbin in that way, in that sequence, to drive the Jedi away. And that's the thing that kind of arguably brings them back, like and leads to her death, which is just like, oh.
Yeah, it really opened his mind up to being exploited by the witches. And we see, and again, Torbin is taking a lot of heat this week, but I also like shout out Dean Charles Chapman.
Kid.
He was great in this episode. And
Bro was like, I'm getting the one chance I can in this episode to use my lightsaber. I'm gonna use it. like that
I
bit with the spin.
We see why he was so adamant to not admit to anything. And to just take that poison and take his own life when May approaches him.
Because it's a terrible thing to admit to admit that your simple fear, your simple homesickness indirectly caused the death of dozens of women who were just simply trying to mind their own business in more or less. Yes, we saw a confrontation, but that's going to be how Torbin sees it. And it makes so much sense that he would take the Barash vow with the kind of personality he has and very sad, tragically take that poison. It all just kind of fits. I went on the Twitter Spaces the other week with Candice from the Geeky Waterfall and also Katrina Dennis, who's been on the podcast before, and I kind of hypothesized that Sol needs to probably have done something really bad to even give Osha a chance of being swayed to the dark side, and I hypothesized that maybe he killed Mother Aniseya And I thought, I really hope I'm wrong about that because that's going to be awful.
I think that's what's going to do it in, because it's very clearly it's the Luke and TLJ moment where I was going to emphasize
but like, worse in terms of action,
worse in terms of action, where like the whole episode to me felt like how Luke has that one moment a week. Now, of course, people misinterpret it. Oh, well, he was always going to try and kill him. You like, yeah, that one moment of weakness where he's like, this is what I have to do, and then immediately regrets it. Soul was kind of in that mindset for like most of the episode. He is dead set on, this is the only way, this is what I have to do. Noble intentions, my intentions are good, but this is how I have to do it. But he has that moment of fear when Mother Aniseya kind of turns into that like black cloud, and he just ignites his lightsaber almost out of fear, because I think Torbin has already ignited his at this point.
He has, yeah. Mother Coral's getting ready to fight, and you hear her go, no, because
kind of like instinctively stabs her. And then there's that heartbreaking line of I
was going to let Osha go. My heart broke for her.
Like some people were like, you could have led with that, but like also, do you think do you really think like that's gonna be the best way to do things? Like when your entire coven is about to fight for their lives, and so
like Mother Coral was practically staging a coup by that point, and Mother Aniseya was like hadn't even had a chance to like talk to her properly. And then you just see
like more of like how you can tell Soul's not fully there, and he's kind of consumed at this point, is when Mae wanders in. He's like, Osha, are you safe? It's like he can't even tell the difference between the two.
Exactly. So he just shows that for all of his like, I have this really special connection with Osha, he doesn't know Osha as well as he thinks. And it's just such a heartbreaking thing, because it's like, again, from a certain point of view, you can see it of like, oh, well, I understand. Like maybe I would react the same if like a witch turned into like scary black smoke and the child that I care about started to fade away.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, she was just trying to protect her child
from the
escalating violence. He didn't, and his ignorance of the coven and their culture and abilities is what leads to him to react with fear. And again, it kind of leads to that whole idea of the Jedi just thinking their way is the only way to use the Force, and their ignorance and somewhat arrogance their ascended view of themselves above other Force cultures does kind of lead to this like misunderstanding and him doing this like awful
the worst possible misunderstanding.
The worst possible misunderstanding, because it's like you said, it's like Luke and Kylo Ren, whereas Luke was able to kind of like resist the urge to act, even though Kylo Ren, like Ben Solo, sees that, and that leads to him like burning down Luke's Jedi temple. You see with Soul gives into that urge and makes that fateful mistake. And the sad thing is, he knows from the second that after Mother Aniseya says, I was going to let Osha go, he knows that he's messed up. He knows he's done a terrible thing. And you see that when he's fighting
that look on his face.
Well, when Mother Coral's fighting him, like he's barely fighting back. He's just literally letting her punch him, and she just yells, "Fight me!" And he won't do it because he's like, what have I done? I've done this horrible thing. I've killed a mother just trying to protect her child.
He fights Coral almost the same way he fought Mae in the second episode.
Yes.
Which says a lot more now, because we know what happened. And we know
it's like literally every time he sees Mae.
About this is, and this is where Indara is not fully off the hook here for me, is that Soul was going to confess to the council, and Indara stopped him.
And I get why she did what she did, because at the end of the day, like
this has been weighing on Soul for
they did have that special
years.
Connection, and I suppose that the way Indara viewed it is it's a kind of penance for Soul for him to train Osha, and that's the thing, because we talked about Soul just kind of blindly going in and having this and saying, well, I've got this connection with Osha. And he's not wrong about that. They obviously have a rapport. Osha, he's picking up on the fact that Osha doesn't want to stay with the coven. She's drawn by that kind of, that lust for adventure, that desire to like experience the galaxy, see new things, not just stay in one place with the coven. So he's picking up on that, and it kind of goes into this gray area of, is he right to encourage that, given that she's a child and her opinion might change, or is he right to nurture it? It's a gray area, and I think, again, Mother Aniseya is probably the parental figure in this episode who makes the best choice, because she lets Osha, she respects Osha's decision ultimately, whereas the other characters all arguably don't. They're making decisions based on how they feel.
They all aimed at, well, not aim, but they all escalate things rather than de-escalate things.
Yeah, like
Coral,
I knew,
girly, what you doing? Like rallying Mae up to she essentially like gets Mae to start this fire, and that was the other thing.
Does.
It's like, well, Mae definitely didn't start the fire. Oh no, she did.
Oh no, she did.
It wasn't like on purpose, but
like she just
one of the things we were dead wrong about.
Oh, for sure. Like I thought the Sith were going to have started that fire, but I guess the Vader door really was just like a nice little Easter egg, or maybe just like a thematic Easter egg to say, "Oh, look, this is the dark side."
Easter eggs in the Acolyte.
Oh, there's no Easter eggs, no bricks and screws, and there shouldn't be any fire in space, right?
No vergeance.
No vergeance.
Don't you know
think of the vergeance?
This episode continued to ruin Anakin Skywalker's legacy. That's what the internet told me. That's what TikTok said. And Star Wars Theory, they all said that, because again, this is Media Literacy 101 here on For the Republic, a Love Letter to Star Wars Animation. The episode very clearly stated that the vergeance was not Osha and Mae themselves, but the vergeance was located on Brendok, and that's what caused the witches to be able to create Mae and Osha.
Exactly.
And now we have these new questions. So it's like, they hypothesized that it could have been one soul split into two beings, and like, how was that going to work out?
Which is so interesting, and it kind of explains.
Of course, everyone took that as Anakin, which, like, stop, just stop. We are 7 weeks into this, man. You are very clearly like reading, and they've even done this where they've read Leslie Headland's quotes and are like, she doesn't even know what's going on in her own show. It's like, no, you guys are choosing to look at it in a certain way.
Exactly. If you're still choosing to look at it like that way, you're either actively ignoring what is actually happening in the show and what's being said in the show, or you're just lying. Because like, it's very clear that the vergeance is not is the thing that was used to create the twins. Anakin in the prequels is the vergeance. The lines are very specific. Yeah, and exactly. And it's what makes the whole episode really interesting, with like that being the inciting incident, because we thought that they got a tip off the Jedi about the Coven, and it's really just an accident. They did just think the planet was they thought unpopulated.
Yep, and this is where we kind of get to the crux of everything, because they're on Brendok, and this is when us High Republic girlies stay winning, because they were investigating how life has returned to the planet after the hyperspace disaster.
Oh, we were
Light of the Jedi, you were all
we were all the Leonardo DiCaprio meme pointing at the TV like, I know what that means.
I know what that is. I know about the Great Disaster. Which was just awesome to hear. But then they theorized that they've encountered a vergeance, which I was, and then Yoda popped, a vergeance, you say? And that vergeance on the planet has what's caused the life to be able to return to the planet. That's what's caused the Coven to be able to live on the planet, and that is what's caused their abilities in the Force to be able to create this life. And Torbin hears that and is like, that's my ticket home, guys.
Yeah.
We're going. Because they've just been, like, we see them, like, doing the most menial Jedi task we've ever seen. Just, like,
the little metal detector.
Kelnacca's got his little, like, metal detector. Which I got a kick out of that. And so, like, you do empathize with him, because it's like, this is a kid. He's like, why am I out here doing this stupid field work for 2 months?
They've been there for weeks as well.
Yeah. And then he gets this like hint of excitement, like, oh, vergeance? Guess what? We can go back to Coruscant now. Yep. And he kind of like, again, very similar to Soul. That's his whole thing.
Tunnel vision, yeah.
Tunnel vision. I got to get the girls. We got to get out of here. Yada, yada, yada. To quickly go back to the topic of Soul and Aniseya, this is going to age the episode poorly, because it's going to come out after the Acolyte finale. But two things that I really hope we get are Mae and Soul kind of having that conversation about the fact that Soul did kill Mae's mother and how that's weighed on him for years. And then
it's
also
awful. Mae actually saw that though. Like that was the thing I wasn't expecting, that Mae saw that, and like just seeing her like cry over her mother's body, it was just it was heartbreaking. And then it really is the kind of thing where you're like, I get why Mae feels the way she does. I get why she had so much rage against the Jedi.
Definitely showed why she was able to be so easily manipulated.
Manipulated by Kai-Mei. Yeah, exactly.
But on its head, I want to see Kai-Mei the stranger have that conversation with Osha.
Oh, he's straight up just going to say, yeah, Soul killed your mother.
Yeah, because she does not know this. And I do think that is sadly going to be the thing that leads to her potentially going to the dark side.
Which is really funny, because it's basically, this is how you know Leslie Headland is kind of like a big time Star Wars nerd, because this is basically the fake script for Empire Strikes Back being put into like an actual canon situation, because that was the fake script for Empire. Obi-Wan killed your father. Like, oh no, that's not true. Like, I swear, if Osha says that's not true, that's impossible, I'm gonna be like, I see what you're doing there, Leslie.
You know who's gonna hate that? The grifters.
Oh no, she referenced the original trilogy.
What?
I don't know what to do.
This is lazy writing. They've never directly paralleled lines before. George didn't do that in the prequels.
They only said I have a bad feeling about this once, damn it.
And in the Clone Wars, all the fucking time. But again, you can't win with the. Well, you can win. You can just.
You can win. Like, but it's always
those motherfuckers.
The trick is always to just kind of treat what they're doing as a grift, and but also kind of like, it's like Jared said. Jared had a really good approach, I felt like, in the episode where we had him on, where he talked about you simply take their argument and go, well, okay, here's how you're wrong, but you also kind of acknowledge up front that it's a grift. And we're seeing this more and more every week, because again, this is an episode that takes pains to kind of point out that everyone is kind of at fault here in this episode. Everyone does something that contributes. I called it like it's a catastrophe of errors. It's a Greek tragedy. It's all these little decisions, all these little choices, all these errors that the characters make. All these
everyone had something that made them be in the state they were at by the time of the beginning of the series, and this episode showed that. And again, it's like it also shows, while we don't know the full events, more into why Indara was kind of leading the cause to have Osha be removed from the Jedi Order before she left on her own volition, or that's what she claimed to have happened.
Yeah.
So I guess we see more and more of that, and the puzzle is slowly starting to be put together here, which I think is very intriguing. And there's many things that this episode has opened up and further explored, which I think was great. But going back to the grift, I hate how this has damaged legit criticism of things.
Oh, for sure.
Because now saying this show has bad writing is like a dog whistle.
Yeah.
Like, now it's like, are you being like, is that your actual opinion, or is that just the grifter going off in there? Because if you think a script is poor, that's a legit opinion. But if you're just like blinded, like, nope, bad writing, this is just Anakin, and it's like, no, you don't know what you're saying. You stop. Just stop. Take a breath. You
can often tell. I feel like the thing is, with these kind of arguments, I think you're absolutely right. Like, it does poison. It poisons this one. Exactly. It does poison discussion in terms of like being able to espouse legit criticism and being able to just kind of say, this thing didn't really work for me, just personally. And it's the kind of thing that just needs to be reinforced. Like, if you don't like a thing that happens in the episode, that's fine. If something doesn't work for you, that's great. I won't say that the Acolyte is flawless. There's definitely things that have bugged me. I think the episode lengths have been a little short on the short side.
Yeah.
And I think the endings, the way the episodes have ended, have always been a little abrupt in terms of cliffhangers. I think the cliffhanger with the stranger is pretty good, but I do always think that they need just like slightly punchier endings.
Yep. It's my opinion has always been like they just kind of just end. Like they need like that.
They just end.
The Bad Batch has a great way of ending things, or if they leave on like a big stinger of like big moment, boom, like Inception noise, cut to credits. This show I feel like is just like, oh, that thing happened. Oh, hold on, transition wipe. We're in the credits already. Like we don't have we don't have that time to process it, which I think in Day it was jarring. But it also kind of worked really well. It's where
it worked brilliantly.
Like, whoa, what the hell? And it's like the episode's already over. So
like you're already freaked out by the stranger, and you're like, wait, no, you edited it there.
But I do actually, that you brought up the episode length, want to talk about that. We can talk about it more in the finale once we get our full opinion on how the season played out. Disney, I beg of you, kill this 6 to 8 episode season model. It is done so much harm to your shows. Even shows that I have really enjoyed. Obi-Wan, Ahsoka. If you go into the MCU,
Book of Boba Fett,
Miss Marvel, Book of Boba Fett, Moon Knight, keep going and going. There are show after show after show where it's like, you know, we're getting pretty close to the end here. How are we going to wrap things up?
Exactly.
And I think for the MCU, it's hurt them more in the long run when you realize a lot of these shows aren't going to get that second season when you thought ahead of time they were going to.
Yeah.
So when you only have 6 or 8 episodes to play with and you're confined to these episode lengths, again, this is streaming. You can have these episodes be as long as you want. And I think that might be the Acolyte's problem more than it being 8 episodes. I do think having this show with this mystery concept, and we still don't know if we're getting a second season yet, which I think we're going to, but we still don't.
They did say
fully
season.
Know.
They
did say season.
They said season finale. That's very different.
Like had me flickering because one post was like the finale of the Acolyte tonight. I'm like, that seems kind of final. But then Disney Plus has season finale. And then the third thing is like, oh, season finale of the Acolyte. So I'm like, okay, I do think we're getting more. But it's another thing of like Ahsoka. When Ahsoka ended, we didn't have the confirmation that season 2 was happening yet. Exactly. And because of how that finale ended, where there were still a lot of things opened up where I'm like, I don't know how I feel fully just yet because we don't know if we're getting that second season. And if this stuff is going to be told in the Filoni movie and not a season 2, I don't know how much focus it's going to get. And I think that might hurt the show. The Acolyte is a very similar thing to where, I'm sorry for going on a tangent here.
It's fine.
Where if you have 2 episodes that are entirely flashbacks, that can work. Even with an 8-episode format. It's the fact that you have that and they're still only like 30, 35 minutes long.
Exactly.
That is what's hurting the show. Because I think the show has been really good. But again, I'm going into a finale for a show again where I'm like, how are we going to wrap everything up here?
Exactly.
And the only times I feel like that hasn't happened for a show where either we know we're getting another season or we don't has been Andor with Star Wars.
Yeah.
Because Mandalorian, we kind of got, Andor, we knew we were getting 2 seasons.
Oh, yeah.
But we had that extended episode length and the episodes were longer. With Mando, we knew it was getting renewed from the get-go, and its way of storytelling is a bit different compared to the other shows. It's more
very episodic. Yeah.
So you can see how things can get resolved. And with Mando, a lot of their like main plot points kind of like come into effect near the tail end of the season as well.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a different thing with that. But like Book of Boba Fett, you're like, what are you doing here? You spent 2 episodes not with Boba. Now we have to wrap everything up in 1 episode. Kenobi,
just one
really
more
liked
episode
it.
Could it's like that as well.
6 episodes. We don't know if this is it. we gotta. Are we rushing to get things done?
Yeah.
It's like Andor and the Bad Batch, I think, have been the two exceptions to that rule. And with the MCU, you have this problem with, I think, every show, if I'm being honest with you. And I don't know if that's the reason why me personally, when I see these shows, more on the Marvel side than the Star Wars side, but I see these shows, I watch them, I enjoy them quite a bit when they come out. But as months go by, I never have that urge to rewatch them again. I wonder if that's part of it. And I just think that you see how things have worked when shows are given longer episode counts. And again, it's how you use those episodes. Like Bad Batch had 15, 16 episode seasons. And sometimes you can be like, all right, we got to move the plot forward a little bit here. What are we doing?
It's not the size of your episode, it's how you use it.
But you still have that time where you can have these episodes where you just follow Emery or you just follow this character. With Andor, you have 12 episodes where you can have 3-4 major story arcs happen throughout the entirety of a season. They're shooting themselves in the foot by not letting each show have that way of storytelling. Especially shows like Ahsoka and like Acolyte, where I think even if you knew going into them that they were going to get renewed for a second season, you could have still spent the way you presented your episodes fleshing out the story a bit more and giving it more time to breathe so you don't have that feeling of, well, we got one episode left. How are we going to wrap everything up now? Especially with how Ahsoka was presented until it really started airing as a miniseries.
Yeah.
And you have that. And as the time went on, we're like, okay, we're probably going to get a second season. But we didn't know that at first. And the finale ends and we get all these different questions and these things happen. We get the Mortis stuff and we're just like,
wait, what?
And they're still on Peridia and we're like, all right, well, they very clearly have to have a second season, right? Or like, how are we going to, what are we doing here? So
she's not just going to like become a hermit like all the other Jedi.
Yeah, that's just my thought.
I agree very much with what you're saying about like episode structure and like the episode count, because like it's a problem I've had with some shows, especially like Book of Boba Fett suffered, I think, in terms of like the amount of episodes. I feel like you could have done the whole Luke and Mando bottle episodes if you'd had extra episodes to pad in between. But I think my optimism kind of says that that's perhaps a holdover of Bob Chapek's time being in charge of Disney, because there was he put mandates out of like, we've got to get these shows out, we've got to get them out, and like we're not going to put showrunners on them. And I do feel like a lot of the companies are now kind of having to like adapt to that, because the Acolyte was put into motion during Chapek's time at Disney. So I think they're still kind of like in reaction mode here. I mean, we're only just starting to see the reaction to like kind of the so-so perception of the MCU at the moment. Like there's lines apparently in Deadpool and Wolverine, where Deadpool will say, "Oh yeah, welcome to the MCU. You're joining at a bit of a low point," like just making fun of that perception. But like, yeah, I think it's definitely something we need to get away from and have like we need bigger episode counts. We need longer episodes if it fits the exploration of the characters and the story. But yeah, to take it back to Acolyte, I think, should we talk about Kelnacca? Because we've kind of gone the whole way not talking about Kelnacca.
Yes, let's talk about Kelnacca.
Oh, my poor Wookiee boy.
Besides the fact that it was such an awesome fight scene, the way it was framed and everything, the cinematography and everything was just so cool. Like the entrance of seeing him like kind of like shadowy and then seeing his eyes go black.
Swaying
and
a little bit,
igniting the lightsaber. Woo! And I just also love the fact that it's not just Coral possessing him, but it's the strength of the entirety of the coven is needed to
the
possess
whole
Kelnacca.
coven was needed to like control him. That was just a really cool visual and very spooky as well. And I just like you said, the whole fight was really cool. Like Yunus Sotamo did all of his stunts as well, because he was the only one who could fit in the Wookiee outfit. And he looks great in motion, like that bit where he just like does the little force jump and does the little Wookiee roar.
Yeah,
it's just fantastic. And I was genuine, even though Torbin, we know Torbin is going to be fine because he's not going to die here. He's going to die later on. I was genuinely a little like scared for him when he gets like when Kelnacca's bearing down on him and he's like pushed against the wall. I again, this is where Leslie Headland's expertise with legends comes in. You know, the reason Kelnacca goes into exile, it turns out, was because he used his claws. And that's forbidden for Wookiees to do. If they do that, they're called mad claws, and they have to go into exile. It's weird that I know about that. This was a Legends fact I knew about because I'd read. There's a Chewbacca graphic novel that that I read that takes place after the character's death in Legends. Spoiler alert for Legends. Like Chewie dies from having a moon dropped on him, and that graphic novel sort of is 3PO and R2 going around getting stories from everyone who knew him, including his like family on Kashyyyk and the cast of the original trilogy. And there's a story that's set on Kashyyyk and shows Chewie fighting a Wookiee who brandishes his claws, and they talk about how it's forbidden. So it's so tragic that that's the reason Kelnacca went into exile, because he wasn't in control of himself. Yeah. His will was taken away from him, and his claw, he would never have used his claws if it wasn't for the Coven.
It shows like why his hut has all those markings of the Coven spread throughout. Like you could tell that
they're in his head. Yeah,
it's still like how Torbin was. They're still in his head and caused him all this trauma and this pain. And you can just tell that like he has to have felt terrible about it. And that is the one thing of like how this episode was portrayed, and everyone kind of did their own thing to screw up massively. It does feel like to me that like Kelnacca's stuff was more worthy of a character taking the Barash vow. But again, because it had that Legends connection, I really like it. And that was the thing.
Yeah.
Full transparency, I was not familiar with. That was the thing when I watched Alex Damon's review of it. I learned about the Mad Claw thing. I'm like, oh, that's actually very interesting. And it was like, oh, how did Torbin get the scar? Because we, like, episode 3 very cleverly, like, kind of showed him in the background with it, but didn't touch on how it happened. And we got to hear... Also, real quick, speaking of Star Wars Explained, before I go into my next tangent, his interview, or their interview with Leslie Headland, had maybe my favorite fact that I've ever seen for a Star Wars show, which is the fact that Yord was a character that originated from one of Leslie's Star Wars role-playing games. That is so awesome. That is maybe like the best nerd fact I've ever.
Oh, like, I love that.
Where you can put also one of your old D&D characters in like a Star Wars.
But also, can we talk about just how ruthless that is to like kill your own OC character? Because like that's your own OC. That's amazing. Like hats off to Leslie. I don't think I could ever have the guts.
Yeah, via neck snap.
Oh, like it is in such a brutal way as well. Like that's incredible. Like it was just incredible, like guts from Leslie to be able to do that. I could never.
Being like, nope, I can't do it. But
I also have to shout out Maggie Lovett's second interview that she did with Leslie on Collider, where they talked about Mae burning the book and likening it to Little Women with Amy March.
Yeah, she had her Amy March moment.
I know, and I love that. I made that connection like back when we talked about episode 3. So I just love that it was in Leslie's mind as well. I just that's really cool.
Does that mean that Mae falling was her getting stuck in the ice moment?
Ooh, maybe. Well, because that's the thing. Because just like that gives you a little bit more empathy for Amy. This whole episode has definitely kind of given us more empathy for Mae and shown how Mae was kind of again riled up by Coral, as you said, and we also like see just the sheer grief on her face. That actress did a great job, by the way. Like it was so heartbreaking to see her just standing over her mother Aniseya.
That Leslie kind of made it clear in both interviews and other ones that Coral is still very much alive. I do think
nobody. She said the nobody rule.
Nobody rule. And I think
we didn't see a body.
I think she's going to play a big role in the second season, because as mad as we are at Soul and Torbin right now,
she played a part.
I still think Coral might be near the top of like the who's at fault on # what happened on Brendok.
Like, I think she was obviously she had that mother bear instinct to protect the children, and I understand that. But again, it's the thing where she escalates things. She riles May up
riles
when
May
she
up,
should.
gets
Yeah,
Torbin to ignite the saber, which indirectly causes Aniseya to do that, which indirectly causes Soul to kill her
and
partner.
it's this kind of thing where Mother Aniseya, see, Soul should have been in the position Mother Aniseya was, because she is trying to de-escalate the fighting. Soul doesn't. Soul gives into his he follows his instincts there, but his instincts are clouded by his emotions. And I do wonder, because obviously, again, to date the episode, we don't know if #what happened on Brendok is going to be made public knowledge, but I would assume it is because of that bill that Senator's trying to push through. But I would wonder if maybe this incident is the thing that is the reason why this is the end of the High Republic era of the Jedi, because this is the moment that the Jedi clamp down on attachments. Because I could very much see the Jedi Council being like, well, you know, Soul doing what he did, following his instincts. He was affected by his attachment to Osha. Because at the end of the day, he's a very genuine care for Osha, but he is letting his attachment blind him to the rest of his actions, and it makes
Indara has several lines where it's like, is that what's happening, or is that what you want?
Exactly. And it's the kind of thing where it's like, if Soul hadn't shown up there, because again, if Indara had managed had managed the situation the way she wanted, would Osha have wanted to be tested? Because again, Indara doesn't want to test them. It's only because of like their proximity to the vergeance.
She has like, oh, that was a good trick to make them think that we're going to test them. And Soul's like, dang.
And the council say no too. The council don't want them trained. The council like, no, just leave them. Just leave them alone. And it kind of shows that for all of the, you know, it shows for all the colonialism undertones that are explored here. And again, to cite Jordan Mason's really good article at Gizmodo, it shows how there are still some good people in institutions.
They're not like going out of their way to like take kids.
Yeah,
like, and that's another thing that people, oh, they're kidnapping kids. I'm like, the council said no, leave them be.
They're too old. They're too old to be.
It was Soul's desire. And again, that was a thing that I really enjoyed about this episode, was we got to see scenes that played out in episode 3 from a different perspective, which changed it in both a positive and negative way. Because we see, for example, with that added context of knowing why the Jedi are on Brendok, we see that line from Aniseya, like, oh, the all-powerful Jedi being ignorant, like, like, and we see that scene from a slightly different perspective now. It's like, well, we know why they're there. You know, the Covenant just kind of like, why, you know, why?
But they were unaware of this.
Yeah, they were unaware of this.
Genuinely unaware. And
but then really heartwarming scenes from the 3rd episode with Soul and Osha with the lightsaber, and then him giving her the test. Those are in a different perspective, because we see them from Indara's perspective now, of Soul very clearly trying to manipulate things in Osha's favor. I like that we did get to see Mae's test play out, and her just be like,
no,
a ship. And she misremembers what Mother Aniseya said. And then that's getting the alarms going in Soul's mind. Like, they're going to sacrifice these children?
Yeah, because it's the kind of thing where it's like, she otherwise wouldn't have said it, but she's so proud of her culture that she doesn't even think to kind of question what she remembers of it. She doesn't question it, because she thinks, oh, it's a great thing. And obviously Mother Aniseya said it's about sacrificing a part of yourself. She was talking in metaphors. But the way Mae puts it across, tragically, it's misunderstood. And again, that's like the whole theme of the episode, these decisions being made out of misunderstanding. And I missed this with when I was talking about Mae. But again, this pays off the line in the 1st episode when Indara says to her after they meet again, and she says, Jedi do not attack the unarmed. And she very emphatically says, yes, you do. She saw that. She saw that that a Jedi made that decision to do that, broke all the rules. Because again, Soul is going again. I mean, this is the kind of thing where it's like, again, this kind of puts into context why maybe Qui-Gon Jinn, despite his intentions, is distrusted by the Jedi Council. And that's why I think it's all going to come out, because it makes sense why the Jedi Council, like, yeah, no, you're trouble. We had a Jedi like you previously who talked about all this kind of stuff, and he did some bad shit. So
I do really like your theory of this kind of being the end of the High Republic era and them really
they've talked it up for a while, I think,
on attachments.
because
This is another example of attachments causing harm and causing bad things to happen. Because we're always are like, oh, that's kind of a dumb rule for the Jedi to have. But you do, in these examples, see why such rules were put in place, even if we don't fully agree with them, and even if we think that when we do get, like, say, Rey's New Jedi Order, for those kind of more dogmatic principles to kind of be thrown out the window or at least modified, you do see why they're put in place and why the Jedi feel like they need 100%. To put them in place because of stuff like this. It's like, oh, this happened because he's too attached to the girl.
Yeah. No attachments.
No attachments.
Yeah, like just this dogmatic rule. I
Anakin,
really like that you just brought up Rey.
Boom, there we go. Go ahead.
I really like that you just brought up Rey as well, because again, like for all the people complaining about the way the Jedi are portrayed here, what I like about this is that it reinforces the importance. You know, for all the people trying to say it doesn't make Anakin important, I'd actually argue this makes Luke a lot more important in terms of a historical figure, because he's the guy who starts to refute the old ways of the Jedi. He doesn't disassociate from his attachment to his father. He lets that guide him to the right decision. And in doing so, not only does he redeem Anakin, he helps destroy the Empire, and he puts Palpatine on the back foot for decades. Palpatine is like literally sent into the shadows. And again with Rey trusts her attachment with Ben Solo, and that's what gives her the strength to finally thwart Palpatine and defeat the First Order. Like this, like Luke and Rey now have so much more significance in the overall tapestry of Star Wars because of events like this, because we've seen the Jedi at their worst in terms of like their arrogance and their unthinkingness in terms of how they engage with the Coven. It allows us to kind of view the actions of characters like Luke, Rey, and Obi-Wan as well in a very different light, because they're characters who actually engage with their attachments and, you know, are able to acknowledge their mistakes and acknowledge the places where the Jedi need to grow. And it's just an overall, like, that's why I like this episode. This episode adds so much
nuance.
So much nuance. Exactly. It really is the most, from a certain point of view, episode that they've done.
Absolutely. And I agree with everything you just said there. And I think, again, I don't think Soul's attachment to Osha is necessarily a bad thing. I don't think attachments are bad. But this does, like I said, give you a further glimpse of why the Jedi adopted these principles. Indeed, why they made these such rules. And to get stories like that, where I feel like some Star Wars fans for the past 25 years have like been kind of like, okay, but why do they have these principles? And if they didn't fully dive into that in Legends, now you get to see full stories take place of, okay, here's kind of why the Jedi are like this.
And it's not simple.
Why the Guardians of Peace and Justice that were talked about in the original trilogy were kind of like not what we expected.
Perfect. They lost
when
their way.
We walked into the theater in 1999.
And it's not arch.
Yeah.
It's treated in a very kind of real, messy way where there's all these different factors, but it does kind of ultimately come down to the Jedi bumbled into a situation where that they shouldn't have been in and caused harm through their misunderstanding and their refusal to kind of like view other force. Because again, I mentioned Luke, this calls ahead to his line that force does not belong to the Jedi. To say that if the Jedi dies, the light dies is vanity. The Jedi are important. They have their role to play in progressing the light side of the Force, but they are not the arbiters of what is good and right. There are other. Just because they're like of the light side of the Force doesn't mean other people who use the Force in different ways, who form other cultures around the Force, are inherently evil. Not every Force user who isn't a Jedi is automatically a Sith. They just perceive the Force differently, and it's very much
reminded me of a very small line that Indara had earlier on in the episode when they're talking about Mae's
about the marking,
and they're like, "Oh, that's common in Force cultures around the world during these rituals." It's almost kind of like they like knew that some of the discourse after episode 3 was going to happen. they're using the Force in different ways. Like, what is this? And like being like, yeah, no, this is not an uncommon thing at all to see covens like this around the galaxy. This is just one of many, and one of many different interpretations. And that's what we've been saying. And that's what I think has been rather commonplace. There was even a brief moment when they were talking after they discovered the coven where they're like, are they Night Sisters? And they kind of just brush it off. So,
and it's like we see in phase 2 of High Republic as well, like when we go to Jeddah in phase 2 for stories like the High Republic, like the High Republic comic by Captain Scott, we see that there are all these different force cultures, all these different cultures that worship the Force in different ways and even have different names for it. And it shows how like the Jedi are not the only Force users out there, and to say that they automatically know what's right just because they're Jedi. It's what leads to this kind of arrogance and being too sure of themselves, to the point where they make these kind of mistakes, where Saul is just like, oh yeah, this is a noble mission. This is we come with noble intentions. It's like, yeah, but this is why your noble intentions will lead to your near destruction, because you leave yourselves vulnerable to be exploited by Darksiders.
And about that line a lot this week.
Oh yeah, like because we see this in the show overall with how Kaimir is able to like take advantage of the Jedi. He takes advantage of their like reliance on their practices, on their saber techniques, and he basically like exploits their reliance on technique and form and rules and all of that stuff. He literally breaks the rules in a lot of ways and exploits. Yeah, poor Yord. It exploits the situation for his own benefit, really, using the flaws of the Jedi to further his own cause, which is what the Sith do. And I like that Leslie has always kind of stressed that about, like, you know, the Sith, because the Sith are bad. They are purely selfish in terms of exploiting things. But Kaimir isn't exactly lying to Osha about any of this. He's simply just pointing out the flaws because he knows that that's all it takes, because the Jedi have left themselves completely vulnerable in their arrogance and their short-sightedness, which it lends to the tragedy of this. Because yeah, Star Wars, the prequels and for Star Wars are a tragedy. It's all about the tragedy of how the Jedi left themselves vulnerable to be nearly destroyed, and how their failure to see what was happening with Anakin led to him being corrupted by the dark side. And it's only through Luke's ability to see that and to view him not as the scary evil Darth Vader, but as his father, that redeems him and redeems the Jedi. Brings, like, that's why that film is called Return of the Jedi. It's the Jedi literally being redeemed through Luke's actions. And it's again with The Last Jedi, but where Luke basically reaffirms that the Jedi have a purpose to play, and he's now no longer the sole arbiter of that, and he passes it to Rey, which my headcanon has always been that Rey heard that, and that's why she has that beam on her face, not just because she's with Finn, but because she's been legitimized as a Jedi by Luke. I always felt that was
I love that theory.
I just love it. Yeah, I just love it because it's just it's what the feeling I kind of came away with, and it makes what Luke says so much more powerful.
Definitely. Again, like we said, there's so much nuance in this episode. So many different perspectives that are not only shown, but can be had and taken away from this episode. Now, I do think some things that people have taken from it, I think are just categorically wrong. I've made that very clear. Jedi are not evil. They're not kidnappers, yada, 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 yada. We've had this discussion a million times.
It's like Anakin all over again, isn't it? From my point of view, the Jedi are evil. Well, then you are lost.
But I like how much it added to the show and to the overall narrative. I do think it, like I said, not knowing what happens in the finale yet, I'm like almost reserving my full judgment of, I got to see what happens in the finale. And like, we could have used another episode. Like that's where I'm at right now. But I did overall very much enjoy the episode. I think it works perfectly with episode 3. But I forgot about something, Donovan. I was about to wrap something up, but I have my one real complaint. My one real took me out of the universe moment. I like that credit song a lot. I said weeks ago that this would be my boomer take if it happened. I don't like real music in Star Wars. I'm glad that if they were going to do it, they reserved it for the credits. I always felt like it was it always felt out of place, and I think it's just because like, oh well, you've never seen anyone else do that.
It might be that, but I think
I'm
also like
fine with like real like diegetic like in universe music in Star Wars, like the stuff in Jedi Survivor, the stuff in Solo,
stuff in Jedi
Cantina
Survivor's great.
songs.
Like both of those.
I like all those. It's like they cut away and it's like, oh, there's lyrics in the credits. And I'm just like, I'm not used to it yet. And this was like, again, I was like, I'm jamming to the song. It took me out of it was like, I'm like, oh, all right, I'm out of it now. Like, it didn't take away my enjoyment of the show or the episode or anything. But it was just like, oh, I don't know if I can get behind this. And again, I'm fully apparent, and I'm well aware that this is my boomer take, and it's kind of the unpopular take right now. But like, this is where I'm gonna the one time I'll do my back in my day. Star Wars didn't have
Star Wars
songs in it.
Star Wars didn't have no real songs in the credits.
Yeah, like I just feel like I don't know, for whatever reason. I could probably explain it better if it wasn't midnight right now, but which is bad to say when you're recording a podcast. But it took me out of the episode. That said, I really like the song. The song itself is very good, and it fits great with the show and the characters of Mae and Osha. But again, I'll be a boomer here. I'll fully accept it this time and this time alone that I was like, I can't do it. But again, the song was good.
Cue Kylo Ren saying, "Okay, boomer."
Okay, boomer. God damn it. But that's gonna do it for this week's episode of For the Republic. A little short this week. But we need to get the episode out, and we are just salivating at the thought that there is a new episode out while we're speaking about this show, and we just need to get to do that as soon as humanly possible. So I'm going to get this edited as soon as I possibly can, and hopefully get it out so it'll be available for you guys.
You're going to take the Barash vow and go into solitude.
Get the Barash vow so I can have the episode ready to go by Wednesday afternoon. We shall see. It's all going to depend on editing times. But yeah, Don, where can everyone find you?
So you can find me on Twitter at Donovan Mead, where I have been sharing my commiserations at the fact that England did not win the Euro 2024 championship. It's not coming home, sadly. All the love to the lads there at the football team. They did their best. They came up against a really good side with Spain. And so many commiserations to the manager, Gareth Southgate, for choosing to leave now. He's done so much for the team, and I won't go on a tangent about England, but it was a lot of disappointment in a very, very eventful weekend for both of us from like both sides of the pond.
Oh my God, yeah. I loved going on social media this weekend. Took a nap, woke up, saw that headline. I was like, what just happened?
What the hell happened?
I was like, I'm sure people are going to be totally rational about this.
Yeah.
What do you know? They were fun. Yeah, anyways, continue.
You can find me sharing my commiserations of that on Twitter at Donovan Mead. You can also find me on TikTok at Donovan McComish. Instagram, you can find me at Donovan_McComish. I have the same handle for Threads. And on Blue Sky, you can find me at donovanmccomish.bsky.social. I am also a question writer for Star Wars Inner Galaxy Epic Confrontations. You can check out our YouTube channel. We have a great backlog of episodes of various Star Wars personalities, including Andrew and Jared and Alden, all these different awesome people who've just gone head to head over Star Wars trivia. So if that's your thing, watching people like compete for Star Wars trivia, definitely go and check it out. Like Andrew and Connor and Amy and a whole bunch of people over on the SWE Discord, I am also a writer and producer for SWEF, which is Star Wars Editor Fiction. The site is currently down at the moment. We're working to get it back up. We do a bunch of interconnected short stories that try to remain within what is canon, but we also take a few elements from Legends, kind of like what Leslie has done with the Acolyte, to great effect. I have written one story that came out in June of 2022. It is called Scars of War. It stars a clone trooper called Blister, who 5 years after deserting the Empire finds his relatively peaceful life on the planet Kivo in the Outer Rim disturbed by the arrival of a Jedi survivor of Order 66 named Shar Kun. The rest of the story is all about them unpacking their trauma, having lived through such a cataclysmic event for the Jedi. So, yeah, if you like Star Wars and pain, picking through PTSD, all that great stuff, then check it out. It was a lot of fun to write.
Absolutely. As for myself, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at Starlight Andrew. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at For the Repub Pod and on Instagram and TikTok at For the Republic Pod. So on weeks like these where scheduling changes happen and the episode comes out way later than we thought, you can follow our socials, make sure you're up to date on, be like, hey, why hasn't there been an episode this week? There you go.
It's all been a bit wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
Exactly. We're still getting over May, honestly. Our YouTube For the Republic Podcast, subscribe there. We're getting dangerously close to 100, so help us out there. And also Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, you can check us out and support the podcast. It does us a great deal of help. Also on my end, the StarlightJournal.blog, where I talk about movies. I am dragging my feet as usual. But I did put out my June film journal sometime last week. And I have a half-year article that I'm going to try and write before I go on vacation at the end of the week. We'll see if I can get it done. If not, oh well, it'll get done at some point. That's my motto with that damn thing. But I love doing it, and hope you guys check it out. As for our coverage of the Acolyte finale, just going to rip the Band-Aid off here and hope no last-minute cancellations happen. But we will be back later this week with our special guest. We mentioned her earlier. Candace Kaw from the Geeky Waffle will be joining us for the first time on the pod to talk about the Acolyte finale with the full crew. We're planning on recording that on Thursday night, and I'll have it up for you guys by the end of the week. Because I'm leaving for vacation on Saturday. I'm going to Galaxy's Edge. I'm so freaking excited. But I will have our Acolyte coverage ready for you guys. And then when I return, we will probably have a couple full season discussion episodes, and we'll catch up on everything that we've said we're going to catch up on for the last 2 months. I'm sorry. It happens. Tells the Empire. It
happens. Yeah.
We'll get to it. There's a lot to look forward to, and there's a lot to discuss. So we are going to go watch the season finale right now. Thank you guys for joining us here. Thank you for talking about #What Happened on Brendok and reliving some pain. And as always, until next time, for light and life, and may the Force be with you.